I'm going to get started here, back up with Jimmy Carter, and we're going to talk about his presidency, his time in office. So let's start with some of the domestic situations that were going on when he came into office in 1977. So we know that inflation was happening, and so what happens when you have inflation? You have the prices go up because the value of the dollar goes up also. So it costs a lot more to, buy items. Um, and so, why do we have inflation? Well, of course, as we've talked about before, we have rising oil costs because of what's going on in the Middle East with the, political and ideological differences between um, Arabs and Jews living in the new country of Israel. And so there's a lot of tension there. The United States, of course, as we talked about, is going to side with Israel. So the OPEC is going to limit our availability and the cost, or raise the cost of oil. We have tremendous government spending going on, trying to fill in the gaps of people um, needing welfare, needing government assistance, and all the different areas that the government, provides that in. We also have increased Social Security. We're going to start having uh, that go up because we're going to start having people who've been paying into it since the 1930s who are going to start retiring and start withdrawing on that. So the government is going to have to start putting money towards that. Um, and so they're going to raise, we call them taxes. I mean, you're paying your percentage into the government. They're going to start doing that part of your check, and so you're going to pay it um, monthly. We also have an increase in our cost of our defense. Even though we have détente going on, which is a relaxation of tensions, we still are going to, spending quite a bit of our budget on maintaining a defense, especially in different parts of the world. It's not necessarily in fighting or building keeping that line of defense, in Europe. Now we're going to have situations in other parts of the world, like, the Middle East and the like, in the Caribbean, in South America, where we're going to have to send some troops. And so this political cartoon here, unemployment, inflation, here's Jimmy and Walter Mondale, these guys, they're out here all by themselves. Um, so they're trying to keep, the economy on afloat. Um, Jimmy, one of the things that he tries to do is cut government spending. What? A Democrat cut government spending? Yes. Um, again, to try to get that uh, you know, the amount of money that's out there and get that down so that the value of the dollar can go up. But when he does cut government spending, he's going to get it from both sides. Interest groups that are going to represent different groups of Americans who think that the government should be paying, attention to them, like your auto industry, okay? Um, and this group right here, the auto industry pollution lobbyists. And so you're going to have interest groups and then you're going to have lobbyists. And these two are going to work together. These guys are the ones that, gather together in the Capitol and try to persuade members of Congress to vote for or vote against a piece of legislation. So this group right here, right, are going to be advocating one way, and then you also have business that are out there. trying to. So this would be your like your auto industry, and then you're going to have people that are going to, try to cut into the profits that the auto industry is making. So, it's kind of darned if you do, darned if you don't, right? So he's going to try to cut the government spending. He's going to run into, these groups that want more government spending or want regulations to benefit their group. Another big topic that he is going to have to handle is energy. Okay, and so in 1977, he is going to create the Department of Energy, um, and our main source of energy is uh, gasoline, right, and oil, and so our dependence on foreign oil um, is going to be at a height, and then when OPEC is going to institute the higher prices, we take a step back and we look at, is this the right thing that we want to be doing? And so we are going to take some steps to, stop our dependence on foreign oil. And so we are going to start being more conservative and uh, and putting some of those limits on emissions. We're going to have some milder winters in the late 70s, and so that we don't need as much, oil to, heat and burn. And we're going to have, thanks to Unsafe at Any Speed by Ralph Nader that we've already read about, we're going to have, better, more fuel efficient cars. And so, our demand, because of these things and also because of the things that were happening in the Middle East, our dependence is going to go down. Okay, but we still have a dependence. And so what's going to happen, all right, is that the little, it's still a lot, but the gas that we do and the oil that we do get from the Middle East is going to make us, think about that. And so in 1979, OPEC is going to raise the price of oil per barrel. And it's going to go from $3 to $12. You're going, what? That's so cheap right now. I mean, back then, right now, we're paying quite a bit more. At the height when gas was so expensive, it was well over $100 a barrel. Um, and so this was OPEC's way of, kind of reestablishing their dominance in this area. And so what's going to happen is we are going to have a shortage. And I can remember this so clearly. I mean, this was the time when I was, in middle school, and just the lines and um, just the limitation on being able to get gas and to be able to go in places. Luckily, we kind of lived in a smaller town, and we could walk to a lot of things. Look at that Honda Civic right there. Kind of interesting to see. This wasn't that long ago. And so gas prices are going to go up, and there's going to be a gas shortage, and it's going to be like rations. So you can see here it says gas by appointment, and people are going to wait in lines, just to get gas. And so there is going to be this problem. How are we going to strike this balance between, um, you know, uh, having this relationship with the Middle East, having a relationship, Arab countries, and having this relationship with Israel. So gas shortage is something that he's going to do. And then, this is another conservative measure, lowering the speed limit so it's not to be more fuel efficient. Let's see. So those are the two main issues that he's going to try to, or going to have to deal with. And unfortunately, as I said, he doesn't please everybody. And so one of the main, when we talk about foreign policies, one of the main issues that he's going to have to deal with is, or actually who chooses to deal with, is the Panama Canal. And so we know we've talked about this. Just quick, reminding you, in 1904, Teddy Roosevelt. Remember, he stole, and I used air quotes on that, the Panama Canal from the Panamanians. Made them sign an agreement. Eventually, later on in 1908, we do compensate them, but we have control over over the canal. And then over the years, Panama's going to, as their economy starts to pick up and they, become more modern, they notice that, hey, why is some other country, taking control of this very vital um, canal? And so they are going to start to put up a little bit of a stink, and they want to try to negotiate getting that right to control that back. And it does kind of pick up in 1964. There are going to be some, bloody riots that are going to take place um, in Panama between, our military that's protecting it and the Panamanians. And so Jimmy Carter, ever the, negotiator, peacekeeper, he is going to, in 1978, is going to sit down and have talks with the Panamanians, and there's going to be a series of treaties that are going to be signed, um, and we are going to give the canal zone back to the Panamanians, except we are going to be able to keep our military there because it is such a vital, passageway between the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans. Um, and we will, by December 31st, 1999, before the turn of the century, we are going to give back control to the Panamanians. And that includes some of those military zones. But we do reserve the right to defend um, against any attack if somebody is trying to take that over. Um, we kind of become the Panamanians, um, fallback. We will help them make sure that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. So this is, seen as great a humanitarian action, but it's also seen as, economically not the best for um, the United States. Another foreign policy area that he's going to try to settle is what's happening in the Middle East. And we know that there's been fighting going on. Really, if we want to go back and we look at in 1976 or 1967, there's going to start what we call, the 6 Years' War, and what history calls the 6 Year War. And it's really gonna, pick back. There's going to be a little bit of an agreement, but there's still going to be constant fighting, primarily with the Egyptians, as we talked about before, with Nasser leading. Egypt is going to be the lead in the Arab nationalization of the Middle East. And then in 1978, the leader of Egypt is going to be this gentleman right here. His name is Anwar Sadat. And the leader of Israel at this time is Menachem Begin. And what Jimmy Carter is going to do is he's going to bring these two gentlemen and their different, views on the Middle East to Camp David. And Camp David is about 30 minutes outside of Washington, D.C., in Maryland. And it's a retreat. It's a home away from home. It's a series of cabins, and you're on the side of a mountain. It's very, remote, but it does have, technologies. A lot of presidents use it as a quick getaway from the hustle and bustle of Washington, D.C. So these three gentlemen meet for 13 days. They discuss how best we can move forward. And the agreement that they're going to make is that Egypt is going to recognize Israel, and finally, first time, and they are going to lay the groundwork to begin to, you know, allow peace and, recognizing Israel. And again, many Arabs are not going to agree with this. And so shortly thereafter, Anwar Sadat is going to be assassinated. And he's going to be assassinated by Muslim extremists. He's watching a military parade, and they are basically just going to, riddle him with bullets. And unfortunately, um, this, ends or puts a real big damper on people living together in peace and harmony. But this is going to be, a first step. Um, and it's been built upon, it's been taken steps back over the years. But this is, seen again as a huge humanitarian step by Jimmy Carter. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what happens in Iran. So the leader of Iran is the Shah, and it's called the Shah of Iran. And so he's the, you know, religious leader, and of Iran. And so they're a theocracy, so based on religion. And so in 1979, he is going to, uh, you know, seek treatment for a cancer that he has, and he wants to come to the United States. Um, and the Iranians do not want him to come to the United States because they see, the United States, they're, Arabs, they don't like the United States. They see this as, something could happen to him, or um, it's just not good practices. And so the Iranians said, don't let him in and don't treat him. And so Carter is going to say yes to him. And what the Iranians are going to do is they're going to turn on him, and then he is going to be, or not, they are going to take and attack our U.S. embassy. And they're going to take 60 people hostage. And they're going to watch this on the news, and they are going to be terrified by this, because the force, and then it's like, what, this this country in the Middle East, and we're the biggest and we're the baddest, and it does not shine very brightly on us. And so what we are ashamed and angered, and they demand that Carter does something. And so Carter is going to send uh, a kind of a rescue team in, series of helicopters, and one of the helicopters is going to crash in the desert, and it's going to kill all of the American soldiers that are on board. Um, the Iranians, finding out that, we were going to send in this, elite military group to try to rescue the hostages, say that they are going to do harm to the hostages, and but they don't. Okay, and so they end up. What happens is that these 60 hostages are going to be in captivity for 444 days. That's well over, right, a year. And he's all this time he's going to continue to try to negotiate, and but what's going to happen is those men and women are going to be released on the very last day of Jimmy Carter's presidency. So the day before, Ronald Reagan, who ultimately wins the 1980 presidential election, is sworn in, they let them go. And why did they do that? Because they thought Reagan would ultimately use force. They knew that, Jimmy Carter was all talk. So the Iranian crisis, again, is going to be not very good, not bode very well for Jimmy Carter. And it happened so close to the presidential election. Afghanistan is another foreign policy. Um, the Soviets are going to invade Afghanistan in December of 1979, and that year, the Olympics were supposed to be held in Moscow, and so Jimmy Carter says, "You know what? Withdraw your troops," and the Soviet Union says no. And then, so what does he say? Well, we're not going. Okay, we're not going because of what you are doing in Afghanistan. Again, Humanitarian Act. And so SALT II is also going to be suspended. And so things get pretty tense between the United States and the Soviet Union, and it has to do with their invading Afghanistan, which is to their south, which, again, they're looking for oil. And then finally, he is going to be a advocate of humanitarian and humanitarian rights and policies, and so he's going to push for this in all countries. He does not want torture. He does not want any kind of mistreatment of people, allowing them, the widest range of religions and faiths and freedoms, press, speech, assembly, all of those. And so this is going to be, some countries are going to not really like that, and primarily the Soviet Union. And so they're going to look negatively on Jimmy Carter in the United States for trying to push these prerogatives on this. He's going to try to use diplomatic and both economic tactics. And he does not win a lot of friends. And so, at home and beyond our borders, it's pretty rough, late 70s. And so that brings us to the 1980 election, and we will talk about what happens because, Jimmy Carter, people are beginning to question him, and so he's going to go against a very formidable foe, as we've already mentioned, Ronald Reagan. And so this is where we'll pick up next time. Thank you. You should be able to answer all 16 questions on your worksheet. See you later.